Long before temples of stone rose toward the heavens, before words for gods were carved into tablets or spoken in holy tongues, there stood the tree. Silent, immovable, and ancient beyond memory, it watched the birth of civilizations and outlasted their ruins. To the earliest humans, the tree was not just a plant. It was a living axis between earth and sky, a breathing bridge between mortality and eternity. Its roots delved into the dark mystery of the underworld. Its trunk stood upon the soil of men, and its crown, shimmering beneath the stars, seemed to touch the realm of the divine. Across continents and ages, people saw in this form a revelation that life itself was sacred, and that every living thing was bound by invisible threads stretching from the depths to the heavens. The earliest myths spoke of this mystery with awe. In Mesopotamia, in the shadow of ziggurats and among the whispering reeds of the Euphrates, inscriptions tell of a sacred tree of life tended by divine hands. To the Sumerians, it was the Hulapu tree, planted by the gods beside the waters of Eridu, where the first city rose. From its branches, the goddess Inanna was said to fashion her throne, her power drawn not from gold or conquest, but from the eternal vitality of the tree itself. Yet the Mesopotamian tree was more than symbol. It was map and mystery combined. Artists carved it with intertwining lines, serpentine roots, and winged guardians who stood beside it holding vessels of water. Some scholars would later see in this image the very prototype of the sacred trees that would echo through centuries. The Asherah of the Canaanites, the tree of knowledge in Genesis, the Bodhi of the Buddha, and the Yggdrasil of the Norse. For ancient man, the tree was not an object of mere admiration. It was a teacher. Its cycles of death and renewal mirrored the rhythm of human life, the decay of the old, the rising of the new. The leaf that fell was not lost. It nourished the roots, ensuring rebirth. To early minds, this was not chance, but divine design. It was as if the Creator had written the secret of resurrection in the veins of every leaf. In Egypt, priests tended groves said to belong to the goddess Hathor, and they spoke of the sycamore of Nut, whose branches shaded the spirits of the dead. This tree, according to funerary texts, offered water to the weary souls traveling the desert of the afterlife. To drink from its branches was to taste eternity itself. The Egyptians painted this image upon tomb walls, a great tree with a woman's arm extending from its trunk, holding a jar of pure water, a gesture of mercy from the divine to the mortal. Meanwhile, across the lands of Canaan, a similar image appeared. Beneath every high hill and beside every green tree, people built altars, seeking the divine feminine, Asherah, mother of gods, queen of heaven. Her sacred symbol was not an idol of flesh, but the living tree itself. The prophets of Israel would later denounce these groves as pagan corruption, yet the reverence for the tree endured in hidden ways, not as worship of wood, but as yearning for the presence of the divine that once walked among men. To the pagans, this yearning was not heresy. It was hunger, the same hunger that drives humanity to reach for meaning beyond the visible. In every branch they saw order, in every root wisdom. The symmetry of the tree became a mirror of the cosmos. Its upward-reaching limbs represented the heavens, its downward roots, the abyss. Between them stretched the realm of humankind, caught between light and shadow, birth and death, ignorance and enlightenment. As centuries passed, the image of the sacred tree grew into mythic proportions. In Persia, it became the hauma, a celestial plant said to grant immortality to those who drank its essence. The Avesta, the holy scripture of Zoroastrianism, describes it as a divine tree of all seeds, from which the renewal of the world would one day spring. In the heart of India, this same concept took root in new soil. There, sages spoke of the Ashvatha, the eternal fig tree that grows upside down, with its roots in heaven and its branches on earth. A vision of spiritual inversion that symbolized the descent of divine truth into material form. Every culture, every age, and every prophet seemed to rediscover this truth in their own way. Whether in the cedar forests of Lebanon, the olive groves of Greece, or the oak circles of the Druids, the tree reappeared as the same universal symbol, the sacred pillar of life connecting worlds seen and unseen. It is no coincidence that ancient kings were crowned beneath trees, or that oracles gave their prophecies from within their shade. In the temple of Dodona, in Greece, the voice of Zeus was believed to speak through the rustling leaves of a sacred oak. Priests interpreted the trembling of its branches as divine speech. To them, the wind through the tree was not mere nature. It was revelation. What the pagans called divine was not simply the wood or the leaf, but the mystery that moved through it. They felt, with a clarity lost to the modern soul, that all creation was alive, that spirit was not confined to the heavens but pulsed in every living thing. To touch a tree was to touch the living fabric of the cosmos. To destroy one carelessly was to offend the invisible order sustaining all life. In this way, the tree became both altar and scripture. Its roots were the laws of the underworld, its trunk the world of man, and its crown the dwelling of the gods. And those who stood before it felt they were standing not before a symbol, but before a being that breathed the same divine breath that animates all. Even the earliest shamans in the caves of prehistoric Europe painted trees beside their visions of animals and stars. Proof that long before religion had names, humanity already sensed that the divine spoke through living nature. The tree was not invented by culture. It was discovered by the soul. And so it stood age after age at the center of human imagination. The first and oldest cathedral, whose columns were trunks and whose ceiling was the sky. As civilization grew, the sacred tree transformed from mere presence in the wilderness to the very axis upon which kingship, priesthood, and cosmic law were balanced. The idea of divinity within nature began to take root in temples and scriptures alike, and yet the form of the tree, tall, grounded, and ever-living, remained constant. In the ancient land of Assyria, kings stood before carved depictions of a stylized tree called the Tree of Life. Its trunk was flanked by winged spirits holding pine cones and buckets, symbols of fertility and divine blessing. This was not a simple ornament. To the Assyrians, this image embodied the very order of creation, the harmonious balance between heaven, earth, and the human ruler who stood at the center of it all. Each branch represented a layer of reality, from the world of men to the domain of gods, with the king as mediator between them. The ritual gestures of the winged genii, touching the pine cone to the tree, were acts of renewal, the eternal cycle of blessing descending from heaven to earth and rising again. What is striking is that this vision was not confined to one culture or religion. The same archetype, the same geometry of meaning, appeared again and again. In India, the Kalpavriksha, the wish-fulfilling tree, stood in paradise, offering whatever the heart desired. It was said to bloom with jewels instead of flowers, its roots nourished by divine nectar. The Hindu mind saw in it the reflection of a deeper reality, that every soul, like a tree, grows from unseen roots in the divine and bears fruit according to its inner nature. In the far north, beneath the gray skies of the Norse lands, this idea took on a harsher, more heroic form. There, the cosmos itself was imagined as a single vast ash tree, Yggdrasil, whose branches held the heavens and whose roots plunged into the 9 worlds. Its leaves fed upon the light of the stars, while at its roots the serpent Nidhogg gnawed endlessly, seeking to bring decay. Yet Yggdrasil endured. Even in Ragnarok, when gods and giants met their doom, the tree did not perish completely. For from its hidden seed, a new world would rise. This is perhaps the greatest lesson the pagans drew from their divine trees. Destruction is never the final word. Life renews itself in secret, even in darkness. The fallen leaf returns as soil, the dead branch feeds the root. The gods themselves, in their endless cycles of death and rebirth, reflected the same mystery written in bark and leaf. In the Celtic world, the Druids held the oak as sacred above all others. To them, the oak was not merely a tree of strength, it was the living doorway between the human and the eternal. Beneath its branches, they performed their rituals, interpreting the movements of mistletoe and the flight of birds as divine messages. The Celtic word for oak, dur, is the root of the word door. And indeed, to stand beneath the oak was to stand before a door, the threshold of wisdom. The Druids believed each tree possessed a spirit, a consciousness that could be communed with through silence and reverence. When lightning struck an oak, it was taken as a visitation of the gods. The sacred groves of the Celts were therefore not random clusters of trees. They were living temples, sanctuaries where the air shimmered with unseen power. In ancient Greece, the image persisted in new form. The olive, symbol of Athena, carried divine wisdom. The laurel, sacred to Apollo, became the crown of poets and prophets. The Greeks saw trees as bearers of sacred memory. The myth of Daphne, transformed into a laurel to escape Apollo's pursuit, is not a tale of punishment but of metamorphosis. The eternal theme of life changing form, yet never ceasing to be alive. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in the heart of the Americas, indigenous peoples also revered the tree as the world's center. Among the Maya, the ceiba, a towering tree whose roots reached deep and branches high, stood as the axis of the universe. Its roots sank into the underworld of the dead, its trunk crossed the world of humans, and its crown supported the heavens where the gods dwelt. To climb this tree in ritual or in vision was to ascend through the very structure of existence. The Maya painted it in green, the color of life, and called it Yaxch, the first and oldest of all trees. Is it coincidence that this same structure, heaven above, underworld below, and the world of men between, appears everywhere? Or is it evidence that the human soul, wherever born, perceives the same sacred pattern in creation? Even among peoples who never met, separated by oceans and millennia, the same truth was intuited. The tree was divine because it revealed the unity of all things. In the Vedic hymns, sages spoke of the cosmic tree as the body of the universe itself. Its roots are above, they said, its branches below. The meaning was clear. Creation flows downward from spirit to matter, and salvation is the return journey, the soul's ascent back toward its root in the divine. This teaching, whispered in ancient India, would echo across the centuries into countless traditions, each rephrasing it in its own tongue. Yet the tree was not only symbol of creation, it was also symbol of trial. For just as a tree stands against storms, so too must every seeker stand against the tempests of life. The wind bends its branches but strengthens its core. Perhaps this is why so many initiatory myths involve trees. The Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, the Norse god Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, the hero Gilgamesh seeking the plant of immortality. In each, the divine tree becomes the stage of revelation and suffering, the place where mortality meets eternity. Consider Odin. For 9 nights he hung, pierced and alone, upon the world tree, seeking wisdom. No one offered him bread or water. At the end, he glimpsed the runes, the secret patterns of reality, and fell screaming from the branches, reborn as the god of knowledge. The lesson is unmistakable. Enlightenment is not given freely. It grows only through sacrifice, just as the tree's fruit ripens only after enduring sun and storm. Likewise, beneath the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha Gautama sat unmoving as temptations and illusions rose to challenge him. The serpent of desire, the demon of fear, all tried to uproot him from the seed of truth. Yet he remained still. And when dawn broke and the morning star appeared, he saw through the illusion of separation. All beings, all trees, all rivers, all lives, one breath. The same truth the pagans called divine, he called enlightenment. Even in regions where the sacred tree was forbidden or forgotten, its shadow persisted. Among the Persians, the white hauma was hidden in a lake guarded by divine beings. In China, legends spoke of the fusang, a miraculous tree from which the sun itself rose each morning. And in Africa, ancient tribes gathered around the baobab, a tree so massive it seemed to contain the world within its hollow trunk. Some believed their ancestors dwelled within it. Others said spirits spoke through its bark. The deeper we travel through these stories, the clearer it becomes that humanity never worshipped the tree as wood, but as a window through which the eternal revealed itself. Each culture gave it a different name, a different mythology, but all pointed toward the same center. The conviction that life, death, and divinity are not separate forces but branches of one vast living reality. When a pagan knelt before the tree, he did not pray to the bark, he prayed through it. He sought communion with that invisible intelligence that animates both the sap of trees and the blood of men. And perhaps this is why, even in modern times, the sight of a forest evokes peace in the soul. The whispering of leaves resembles ancient hymns. The filtered light that falls between branches feels like the breath of something older than civilization. A quiet reminder that, before the gods were named, the world itself was sacred. As humanity's vision of the divine deepened, the sacred tree grew beyond symbol. It became law, prophecy, and mirror. Every civilization that sought to understand the order of the universe eventually looked upward, and in the branching of a tree, they saw the very structure of heaven. To the ancient mind, this realization was not metaphorical. The universe was a tree, alive, breathing, conscious. The stars were its fruit, the winds its voice, the rains its tears. When thunder rolled through the skies, it was the trembling of its cosmic branches. Priests and mystics did not simply imagine this. They experienced it in trance, in prayer, in vision. The shaman who journeyed into the spirit world often climbed a tree, or, in the vision of his soul, ascended one that reached through the clouds. This act, recorded among Siberian, Mongolian, and Native American traditions alike, was more than ritual. It was ascent through the layers of reality. Each branch represented a plane of existence. Each level of leaves shimmered with a different light. At the top, the shaman met the Sky Father, the luminous principle that gave breath to all worlds. Such journeys were not considered imagination but participation. Humanity entering again into the great circulation of divine life. And so, long before the written word, the tree became humanity's first cosmology, its trunk the pillar of truth upon which all later religions would lean. In Babylon, scribes recorded myths of the tree of immortality, hidden beyond the waters of death. The hero Gilgamesh sought it, believing he could bring back eternal life to his people. He found it at the bottom of the cosmic sea, but while he rested, a serpent stole it away. This story is among the oldest human tales, and yet in its loss we feel something universal. The tree that gives eternal life is not found by force or desire. It cannot be taken, it must be understood. The serpent that takes it is not always an enemy, but the force of transformation, the reminder that immortality lies not in possession, but in regeneration. To the Sumerians and Babylonians, the gods themselves were bound to the tree's rhythm. In the cycle of seasons, the death of winter, the rebirth of spring, they saw divine drama reenacted endlessly. When the goddess Inanna descended into the underworld, it was as though the tree itself shed its leaves. When she returned, the first buds appeared. Thus, even the myths of love and death were echoes of the tree's secret, that life is not lost but transformed. Across the Mediterranean, this same truth was retold in new tongues. In the mysteries of Dionysus, vines replaced branches and wine replaced sap, yet the essence was the same. Divine life flowing through nature, offered to those willing to taste the eternal within the mortal. The God who dies and rises again each year was not a mere agricultural metaphor. It was an invitation for man to remember his own divine root, to awaken from the illusion of separation and return to the living unity from which he came. In ancient Egypt, beneath the gaze of the sun god Ra, the Persea tree was said to hold the soul of Osiris. The Book of the Dead speaks of two sacred trees growing at the gate of heaven, their leaves inscribed with the names of the righteous. To dwell among them was to live in peace forever, nourished by divine light. The Egyptians carved these trees on tomb walls, showing the dead standing before them as if before the throne of God. Life was a journey back to the tree, the source from which the soul first fell into flesh. To understand why trees held this universal power, one must look not only at religion but at perception itself. A tree is the only living form that unites opposites in perfect harmony. It stands rooted in darkness yet reaches for light. It is motionless yet grows. It is silent yet speaks through every leaf. No wonder ancient people saw it as divine. It is both cross and circle, heaven and earth, male and female, the perfect synthesis of creation's dual forces. In India, this duality was celebrated in the sacred fig tree, the people. Under its shadow, the gods were believed to dwell. The air beneath its leaves was said to vibrate with holiness. Even today, pilgrims circle such trees clockwise, offering flowers and prayers, recognizing in their form the living presence of the eternal. The Rig Veda, among the oldest scriptures on earth, speaks of the cosmic tree that has its root above and branches below. This root above is the eternal source, the unseen reality from which all creation flows. Its downward branches are the worlds of matter, shadow, and time. And the soul, caught in these branches, must climb back upward, tracing the sap of divine wisdom to its source. This teaching found echoes in later philosophy. The Greek thinkers, inheritors of both Egyptian and Eastern wisdom, described the cosmos as a living organism. For Plato, the world soul nourished every being as the sap nourishes every leaf. For the Stoics, the logos, divine reason, flowed through creation as life flows through the veins of a tree. Even Aristotle, though more analytical, wrote that nature desires life, and that every living thing seeks its own perfection, its highest flowering. Yet in all these systems of thought, the image of the tree remained central. Quiet, unassuming, yet eternally alive. Among the Celts, there was a belief that every tribe had its own sacred tree, standing at the center of its land. To cut it down was to wound the tribe itself. When enemies invaded, one of their first acts was often to destroy the rival's holy tree, for in doing so, they symbolically severed its connection to the divine. The Celts saw their world as a vast forest of spirits, each tree a guardian of a secret wisdom. Some whispered that the souls of the dead were reborn as trees, living silently until the cycle of rebirth called them back to human form. In the Baltic lands, similar tales survived. The Lithuanians and Prussians kept holy groves, where no branch could be broken without sacrifice or prayer. They believed that every grove had a voice, that the rustle of its leaves was the murmur of the gods themselves. Even in distant China, emperors performed ceremonies beneath the tree of heaven, symbol of the empire's divine mandate. The first rays of sunrise would strike its branches as incense smoke curled upward, merging heaven and earth in a single breath. The emperor, seen as the bridge between worlds, stood before it in silence. For to rule justly, he must be rooted like a tree, nourished by heaven yet serving the earth. Such rituals were not superstition. They were philosophy embodied. The ancients understood something we have nearly forgotten, that the world is not a machine of lifeless matter, but a living temple whose altar is nature itself. To cut down a tree without reverence was once seen as sacrilege, not because the tree was God, but because it was kin, an elder sibling in creation, closer to the source than man himself. The pagans who called the tree divine were not fools worshipping wood. They were seers gazing at the architecture of the cosmos through the simplest of forms. They saw what modern eyes often overlook, that the divine does not dwell only in heaven, but in the sap of all living things. If one listens long enough beneath the branches of an ancient tree, a strange stillness arises, a stillness older than language. It is said that wise men once learned their laws, their symbols, even their alphabets from the branching of trees. The Phoenician letters, the Norse runes, the agam of the Celts, all took shape as markings upon wood, as if writing itself were the child of trees. And indeed it was. The tree gave humanity not only shade and fruit, but knowledge. Its branches became parchment, its heartwood became tablets, its form became metaphor for the mind. Ideas grew like branches from a trunk of memory, and the soul was said to bear fruit when illuminated by divine understanding. In this way, the sacred tree was not just outside humanity, it was within. Every person became a microcosm of that greater cosmic tree. Roots in the past, branches in the future, trunk in the eternal present. To live wisely was to keep the inner tree balanced, nourished, and aligned with the divine source from which all life flows. As centuries passed, the sacred tree did not vanish with the rise of empires. It transformed, following humanity like a silent guardian through every age of faith. When temples of marble replaced groves of oak, and incense smoke rose where once leaves whispered, the image of the divine tree simply changed form. Its roots extended into new religions, new symbols, new revelations, because the truth it carried was too ancient, too deep to die. In the Near East, the idea of a divine tree intertwined with the very birth of moral consciousness. Within the gardens of early myth, the paradises and lost Edens of memory, two trees stood side by side, one of life, the other of knowledge. Though the languages differed, the meaning was universal. To eat of the fruit of the divine tree was to awaken, to taste wisdom, to perceive good and evil, to understand the mystery of existence. But such wisdom came with a price. Ancient peoples knew that enlightenment and exile were two sides of the same truth. To touch divine fire is to be burned. To see the face of God is to be changed forever. The myths of the tree of knowledge, whether in Mesopotamia, Canaan, or early Hebrew tradition, carried this same haunting paradox. The divine tree both nourishes and tests, blesses and humbles. For the ancients, wisdom was not a gift one received easily. It was earned through journey and trial. Just as a tree's roots must press through stone to find water, so must the soul endure darkness to reach the light. The fruit of the divine tree, in this sense, was not mere knowledge. It was transformation. In Persia, the sacred tree known as the Geocarina was said to grow in the waters of the cosmic sea, guarded by divine beings. Its fruit granted immortality to the righteous at the end of days. Yet until that time, it remained hidden, waiting like a promise unfulfilled. The myth carried a message that echoed through generations: that humanity's fall from immortality was not a punishment, but a preparation. The divine fruit could not be taken before the soul was ready to receive it. In Greece, philosophers began to translate the ancient tree's mystery into language of thought and virtue. Plato spoke of the soul as a plant rooted in the heavens, drawing nourishment from truth and beauty. The branches that reach downward into matter, into the world of shadows, forget their origin unless they turn their leaves back toward the light. Thus, the philosopher's path was nothing less than the upward growth of the inner tree, from ignorance to wisdom, from darkness to illumination. The same idea appeared in the East with subtler beauty. In Buddhist and Hindu thought, the Bodhi and Ashvatha trees became symbols of awakening. Under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha achieved enlightenment. But what exactly did he see in that moment? Scripture says he saw the interconnectedness of all life, the endless chain of cause and effect binding all beings. In the veins of a leaf, he perceived galaxies. In the falling of a leaf, he saw birth and death as one continuous act of divine play. The Bodhi tree, therefore, was not a stage of the story. It was the revelation itself, the mirror in which he saw the universe. And so it is across the world's sacred histories. Every time humanity comes near the divine, the image of the tree returns. Among the Hebrews, though they rejected the pagan groves, the symbol endured in purified form. In Proverbs, wisdom herself is called a tree of life to those who embrace her. In later Jewish mysticism, the Sphirot, 10 emanations of divine energy, are arranged in the pattern of a tree. Each branch represents a quality of God: mercy, strength, beauty, wisdom, understanding. To ascend this tree is to draw nearer to the divine essence, to reunite creation with its source. This mystical tree of life would later influence Christian mystics, Islamic philosophers, and countless seekers who saw in it the same truth the pagans had known: that the divine order is not linear but organic, a living structure of interwoven realities. Its branches extend through every soul. Its roots lie beyond time. In the Christian tradition, the tree reappears transformed yet familiar, now as the cross, the tree of redemption. To those with eyes to see, the cross is not the rejection of the pagan tree but its fulfillment. The vertical beam, reaching from earth to heaven, is the axis mundi, the world's center. The horizontal beam, stretching outward, is the embrace of humanity. At their intersection lies the mystery of divine union, the point where God touches creation. Thus, even the instrument of suffering becomes, in deeper understanding, the continuation of the ancient symbol of life. The blood that flows from it is the sap of renewal. The wood once cursed becomes the living trunk of salvation. Through it, the story of the divine tree comes full circle. The same form that once granted wisdom in Eden now grants redemption on Calvary. And though the tone and theology have changed, the essence remains eternal. The divine tree as bridge between mortality and the infinite. In the East, the same symbol breathed through other forms. The Taoists spoke of the peach tree of immortality in the garden of the goddess Shiwangmu, whose fruit ripened only once every 3,000 years. To eat it was to transcend death. This tree was not merely myth, it was metaphor for the long cultivation of the spirit. Just as a tree grows slowly, unseen beneath the soil before it rises toward the sun, so too the immortal soul ripens through patience, discipline, and time. The Taoists, like the Druids and Vedic sages before them, saw that immortality was not about endless existence but about harmony, the soul becoming so aligned with the rhythm of the universe that it no longer decays. The divine tree was therefore a teacher in stillness. It did not speak in words, but in seasons, in the patient unfolding of leaves, in the acceptance of winter's silence. The wise learned not to conquer nature but to mirror it. When storms came, the tree bowed. When drought came, it endured. To live in harmony with the Tao, said the sages, is to live as a tree lives, balance between heaven and earth, receiving and giving without striving. Across all these traditions, the tree stands as humanity's oldest scripture, one written not on parchment but on the living world itself. Its teachings are simple yet inexhaustible. That life is one. That death is not the end. That wisdom grows slowly, from root to crown. That all things are connected through invisible threads of divine breath. And perhaps this is why the image of the world tree still appears in the dreams of modern people, even those who no longer believe in gods. In the depths of the psyche, the archetype remains alive. Carl Jung called it the axis mundi of the soul, the symbol of the self, the totality of human consciousness connected to the divine unconscious. He saw in it the same wisdom that shamans and mystics had seen for millennia. The tree is the image of spiritual wholeness. When the modern mind seeks meaning, when it feels lost in chaos or despair, it is, in truth, seeking the tree once more. Not the tree of superstition, but the tree of being itself, the unbroken link between the human heart and the divine order of the cosmos. Thus, even in the age of machines, the old myth endures. Every skyscraper that rises toward the clouds, every antenna that stretches to the heavens, unconsciously repeats the gesture of the ancient oak, reaching upward, yearning for light. And every human soul that kneels in silence, seeking truth, is watering the roots of that same eternal tree. Long before any written word, before the first priest or king declared divine authority, there were the trees. Towering above the shifting plains, whispering through the seasons, they stood as living bridges between earth and sky. Humanity's first temples were not built of stone, they were planted. Beneath their branches, the wind spoke in the tongues of the unseen, and roots reached into mysteries no man could measure. Every ancient civilization, without ever meeting the others, reached for the same truth. That life itself seemed to emerge from a cosmic tree, an axis connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. In this unity of belief, separated by continents but joined by spirit, the human soul seemed to recognize its own reflection in the form of a tree. In the forests of old Germania, the tribes worshipped the sacred oak of Donner. It was not mere superstition, it was an acknowledgement of presence. The oak stood firm against storms, reaching unbroken toward the divine vault above, as if defying even time itself. When the Christian missionaries came centuries later and felled the oak to prove the triumph of their God, the people trembled, not from fear of men, but from fear that the world itself might collapse with it. For to strike down the sacred tree was, to them, to strike at the spine of existence. Far across the ancient steppes, the shamans of Siberia and Mongolia spoke of a celestial birch, the world tree that their spirits climbed during trance. They believed its trunk pierced the heavens, its branches touching the sun, moon, and stars. To ascend, it was to pass through the layers of the cosmos, guided by rhythm and vision, toward the great Sky Father who dwelled at its crown. The birch was not only a tree, it was the map of creation, the stairway of souls. The ancient Chinese spoke of the Jianmu, the pillar tree that stood at the center of the world, linking the realm of mortals with that of heaven. It was said that divine beings ascended and descended through its branches, bringing order to chaos and harmony to the cosmos. The symbolism was the same. Life rising, divine descent, eternal connection. Even in the sands of Mesopotamia, where few trees grew, the symbol persisted. On the walls of Sumerian temples, the sacred tree of life appeared again and again. Its roots spiraling downward, its crown curling upward, guarded by winged deities with cups of sacred nectar. The Akkadians called it the Tree of Truth. The Babylonians drew it as a ladder of life itself. The image spread like a seed carried by the wind, reappearing in Egypt, Persia, and India, transformed but never lost. What is it about this form, the tree, that so perfectly mirrors creation? It begins below, hidden in darkness, its roots clutching the unseen. From there, it rises toward light, unfolding through cycles of birth, decay, and renewal. The tree embodies both gravity and grace, bound to earth, yet always yearning for heaven. Perhaps that is why ancient man saw in it the essence of the soul. Fallen, yet aspiring. In the Vedic hymns of India, the world is described as an inverted tree. Its roots, the hymns say, dwell in the heavens, while its branches spread downward into material existence. This Ashvatha tree represents both the bondage and liberation of man, the roots symbolizing divine origin, the branches the spreading illusions of the material world. To cut it at its base was to awaken, to find freedom by tracing existence back to its divine source. Meanwhile, in the heart of Egypt, beneath the burning sun, the Ish tree grew in the gardens of Heliopolis. The gods themselves were said to inscribe the names of kings upon its leaves, granting immortality through divine remembrance. The goddess Hathor, often depicted beside it, offered the waters of life drawn from its roots. To the Egyptians, this was no myth. It was a reflection of divine order, where even time itself bloomed from the sacred tree. And yet, among all these civilizations, one mystery remains. Why did every human culture, from the jungles of Mesoamerica to the tundra of the Arctic, envision the cosmos as a tree? Some say it was simply the most visible symbol of continuity, a being that lived longer than any generation, feeding both body and spirit. Others say it was something deeper, a collective memory of divine communion, a time when humanity felt itself rooted in the sacred fabric of creation. The Mayans called it the Ceiba. They carved it in stone, a mighty trunk rising through the heavens, its roots plunging into the underworld. The four directions of the cosmos extended from its branches, and from its heart flowed the divine sap of existence. When the world was created, the gods placed the Ceiba at its center to hold everything together: sky, earth, and the realms beyond. In Norse belief, this same image emerged again as Yggdrasil, the ash tree that held 9 worlds in its embrace. At its base lay serpents and shadows, gnawing at its roots. In its branches perched eagles and stags, symbols of thought and life. Even the gods themselves, including Odin, were bound to it. The Allfather hung upon Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, in search of knowledge, not of conquest, but of truth. From the pain of that divine sacrifice came wisdom, for the tree reveals its secrets only to those willing to die to the self that seeks them. Across the ocean, the Celts believed that every grove was sacred, every tree a dwelling of spirits. The Druids, whose name itself derives from Durwos, meaning oak, gathered in these groves to speak with the unseen. They believed that the world of gods and men met in the hush beneath the leaves, that in the heart of the forest, one could still hear the breath of the divine. To them, cutting down a tree was not a small act. It was a spiritual crime. A single oak could stand for centuries, watching over the generations like a guardian of time. Its presence commanded reverence. Its fall, when it happened, echoed through legend. But even as empires rose and gods changed names, the symbol endured. In Greece, the oracle of Dodona spoke through the rustling of oak leaves, where priests interpreted the voice of Zeus himself. In Persia, the hauma plant, a cousin of the sacred tree, offered divine intoxication, the nectar of immortality. In each culture, the form shifted, but the essence remained. The tree divine was not merely wood and leaf, it was the architecture of creation. The more one studies these symbols, the more they seem to whisper of a forgotten unity, a knowledge that ancient humanity once shared but later fragmented. Beneath all myth, the tree stood as a silent teacher, speaking a truth beyond religion or nation. That life is sacred because it is connected. Perhaps that is why, even today, the sight of an ancient tree evokes reverence. We feel it instinctively, that this living being has witnessed what we cannot imagine. It has stood through generations, breathing the same air as our ancestors, and will continue long after we are gone. In its silence, it holds memory, the memory of creation itself. And so, the pagans called it divine, not because they worshipped the wood, but because they saw in it a reflection of the eternal. The tree was a reminder that the same force that pushes sap through bark also moves the stars through heaven. The same spirit that raises the branches skyward lifts the human soul toward meaning. To stand before such a tree was to stand at the threshold of the divine. And perhaps, without realizing it, humanity has always been standing there, listening to the whisper of leaves that speak of things eternal, waiting for us to remember what we once knew. In the heart of the night, when the wind moves through an ancient forest, one can almost hear the world remembering itself. The rustle of leaves is not just sound, it is memory breathing. For each leaf carries the pattern of 1,000 generations, and each tree remembers the pulse of creation that first stirred in the silence before time. To the pagans who called the tree divine, that sound was the voice of the cosmos. They said that in the beginning, before gods had names, there was only the great tree, vast, radiant, its roots woven into eternity. From its branches, light poured forth like rivers of fire. From its roots, shadow and matter were born. The stars themselves were said to hang like fruit from its limbs. Every world, every being, every breath was a vibration of that same living body. Humanity was not separate from it. We were its children, grown from its seed, given consciousness so that the tree could see itself. And when we die, they believed, we do not truly perish. We return to the soil that once fed us, and our essence flows back into the roots, merging again with the divine whole. That was the oldest faith, older than temples, older than priests. A faith that did not require belief, only awareness. To touch the bark of a tree was to feel the pulse of the universe. Slow, vast, patient, eternal. The ancients saw time not as a line but as a circle, a cycle of seasons repeating endlessly, life feeding death and death birthing life. And at the center of that cycle stood the tree, unmoving yet alive, connecting every realm. Among the early Persians, there was the tale of the hauma, the plant of immortality. It grew upon the sacred mountain, guarded by spirits of light. To drink its sap was to taste eternity. Not the kind that lasts forever, but the kind that knows no beginning. For the tree did not promise escape from death. It revealed that death itself was part of divine order. In Greece, philosophers would later echo this idea in a different tongue. They spoke of the axis mundi, the world axis, an invisible pillar that joins heaven and earth. Plato hinted at it when he described the soul's ascent through spheres of light. The Stoics saw it in the cosmic fire that unites all being. Even the poets of Rome, when they wrote of sacred groves, were not merely describing beauty. They were describing the architecture of the cosmos, the sacred vertical that gives meaning to all things. In the ancient temples of Assyria, priests would anoint wooden poles with oil and perfume, decorating them with ribbons and gold. Later ages would misunderstand these as idols, but they were never meant to replace divinity. They were meant to recall it. They were symbols of the sacred tree, the invisible spine of creation, brought into human sight. And in Egypt, where the Nile flowed like a green vein through the desert, the tree of life stood in the garden of Ra. The gods sat beneath it, drinking the waters of eternity. From its branches came divine fruit, knowledge, harmony, and rebirth. The pharaoh, when crowned, was said to be born again beneath its shade. The act was not political, but spiritual. The king became a living branch of the cosmic tree, charged with maintaining the balance of heaven and earth. Elsewhere in the East, the Buddhists spoke of the Bodhi tree, the tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment. It was no coincidence. For enlightenment, they said, is not the discovery of something new but the remembering of something ancient, the realization that all things are connected, and that the self is but one leaf upon the same eternal branch. How could it be, then, that across continents and centuries, this single symbol reappears, again and again, in forms too similar to dismiss? Was it coincidence, or was it revelation? Did humanity invent the tree divine, or did the tree reveal itself to humanity, whispering its truth to every culture in its own language? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of truth itself. Truth does not belong to one people or creed. It grows where it is tended. It takes root in different soils, but its fruit is always the same: understanding. The pagans, the prophets, the sages, they all drank from the same root. They just named the branches differently. Some called it Yggdrasil. Some called it Ashvatha. Some called it Seba, Isht, Genmu, or Hauma. But beneath the names, it was always one: the living axis of being, the tree that carries the soul of the world. To stand before such a symbol is to feel both small and infinite. It humbles, yet uplifts. The tree teaches silently. Everything that rises must be rooted. The higher we grow toward the light, the deeper we must descend into the soil of understanding. Without roots, no branch can bear fruit. Without humility, no wisdom can endure. The ancients knew this balance. That is why they guarded their sacred groves, why they whispered prayers to fallen leaves, why they built their myths around trunks and crowns. They knew that man's greatness is not in mastering nature but in harmonizing with it. There is an old Celtic saying, "When the last tree falls, the sky will fall with it." It was not superstition, it was foresight. For if the tree divine is the structure of existence, to destroy it is to unravel creation itself. In our age, we no longer see the world as sacred. We measure, we exploit, we consume. But the myth of the tree has not vanished. It waits. It survives in our languages, in our symbols, even in our architecture. Skyscrapers that mimic trunks, networks that mirror roots, energy flowing like sap through invisible circuits. We have recreated the tree unconsciously, even as we forget its meaning. Yet perhaps forgetting is part of the cycle too. For every winter has its spring, and every fallen seed its rebirth. Maybe humanity's distance from the sacred tree is only temporary. A night before dawn, when the wind passes through the branches, there is a rhythm older than any faith. It carries the same sound heard by the first humans who looked up and felt wonder. That sound does not preach. It reminds. It tells us that everything, from the stone beneath us to the star above, is connected by invisible threads of life, and that somewhere deep within those threads, the divine still breathes. To the pagans, that breath was God's whisper before man learned to write his name. They called it the spirit of the tree, not as a rival to heaven, but as its reflection on earth. For the tree, in all its forms, has always been a bridge between matter and spirit, between what we see and what we long for. And so, as long as there are roots in the ground and leaves in the wind, the sacred tree will continue to teach, wordless, patient, eternal. It waits not for worship, but for remembrance. It does not demand faith, only attention. For in every seed that breaks the soil, in every forest that hums with life, the voice of the divine still speaks, just as it did in the beginning. The deeper one ventures into the myths of ancient peoples, the more the tree divine reveals itself not as a single object, but as a living network of meaning. Its significance lies not only in its presence but in the relationships it forms, with the earth, the sky, and with humanity itself. Across continents, despite differences in climate, language, and culture, people understood that certain trees were not merely plants. They were vessels of life, time, and spirit. In northern Europe, beyond the oaks of Germania and the ash of Yggdrasil, the birches and rowans held subtle powers. Folk tales tell of spirits dwelling within their branches, guardians of travelers, healers of sickness, and keepers of wisdom. Leaves were plucked as talismans, bark was ground into salves, and the very shadow of these trees was considered protective. The tree itself was a mediator, a threshold between the visible world and the unseen. Far to the east, in the lush valleys of China, sacred trees were planted at the centers of temples and palaces. The ginkgo, with its fan-shaped leaves, was revered as a symbol of resilience and longevity. Monks and scholars would meditate beneath these trees, finding clarity and insight in their quiet presence. They believed the life force flowing through these trees was the same that animated the cosmos, the chi or breath of the universe. In every sway of a branch, they read patterns of fate, morality, and cosmic order. In the Americas, before the arrival of Europeans, indigenous peoples had their own sacred trees. The ceiba, towering and immense, was not only central to their cosmology but also a literal axis of the world. Its roots connected the underworld, its trunk the mortal realm, and its branches the heavens. Rituals of planting, climbing, and offering were performed to honor the ceiba's life-giving power, teaching the young to respect the harmony between earth, sky, and human activity. Even the desert regions, seemingly barren of vegetation, had myths of divine trees. The palm was more than sustenance. It was a bridge to the sacred. Nomadic tribes spoke of ancestral spirits residing in the palms, whispering guidance through the wind. Each tree became a living chronicle of survival, linking generations through its cycles of bloom and decay. The pagans' reverence was not superstition but a deep recognition of interconnectedness. They saw that the branches of the tree mirrored human society. The roots held memory and tradition, the trunk held discipline and structure, and the branches represented creativity, aspiration, and transcendence. To honor the tree was to honor the harmony of life itself. This awareness extended beyond the physical tree to symbolic representations. Carvings, paintings, and woven textiles often depicted the tree with spiraling branches and deep roots. Even when the species changed, oak to pine, birch to ash, the symbolism remained. It was not the botanical specifics that mattered, but the principles embodied: growth, resilience, renewal, and the connection of all things. In Norse legends, Yggdrasil stretched through 9 worlds, connecting realms of gods, humans, and spirits. In these myths, the tree is both home and highway. Serpents gnaw at its roots, birds perch on its branches, and cosmic forces flow through its veins. The Norse understood that peril and vitality coexist. Danger is intrinsic to life structure, just as decay feeds new growth. This was a profound insight into the balance of existence, framed within the living symbol of the tree. In Celtic traditions, groves were sacred not only for the trees themselves but for the rituals performed there. Druidic ceremonies often involved the selection of a single tree for divination or sacrifice, acknowledging that each tree holds a unique spirit. The ritual was an act of dialogue with the divine, not domination, but conversation. Even today, echoes of these practices survive in folklore. The idea that certain trees can bring luck, health, or vision, that they are repositories of spiritual energy, waiting to be recognized. Across Africa, the baobab tree carried a similar resonance. Its massive trunk could hold water, and its hollow chambers became shelters for travelers and storytellers. Beyond practical use, it symbolized endurance, knowledge, and generosity. Communities gathered beneath its shade, narrating myths of creation, trickster spirits, and ancestral heroes. The tree served as both stage and teacher, grounding humanity in the natural cycles of life while inspiring reflection on mortality and continuity. In the forests of India, the banyan tree's aerial roots formed natural labyrinths. Pilgrims wandered beneath its canopy, finding solitude and insight. Every aerial root was a thread of possibility, symbolizing the infinite interconnections of the universe. Meditation and study under the banyan revealed layers of reality. The material world intertwined with the spiritual, human action intertwined with cosmic law. The universality of these beliefs suggests that the sacred tree was not invented in a single place, but discovered repeatedly across human consciousness. Each culture's version may have differed in form or name, but all recognize the same underlying truth. Life is layered, interconnected, and divine. To the ancient mind, the tree was also a teacher of cycles. Its leaves grow, mature, fall, and return to the soil. Its sap rises and descends, unseen yet essential. Seasons change above its branches while roots anchor unseen. Humanity, in turn, learns patience, continuity, and reverence for unseen forces. Death is not final. Life is not linear. Growth is never complete. In this understanding, the tree embodies the philosophy of existence itself. Even today, the lesson endures. Modern humans, disconnected from forests and wild landscapes, still feel awe when encountering an ancient tree. Its height, age, and presence evoke humility. We recognize instinctively that such beings have witnessed centuries of life, and in that witnessing lies an echo of the sacred. The trees speak, though silently, reminding us of a world older and wiser than our own. And so, the pagans called the tree divine, not because of superstition, but because they understood a profound reality. That all life is interwoven, that the sacred is found in the cycles of growth and decay, and that the universe itself can be read through the patterns of a single living tree. The tree divine endures as both symbol and teacher. Its lessons persist through myths, rituals, and collective memory. It reminds humanity that existence is both fragile and resilient, ephemeral and eternal. To walk among sacred trees is to walk among the echoes of all cultures that have revered life, to hear whispers of wisdom that have survived empires, invasions, and centuries. Perhaps this is why the ancient pagans, even without scripture or doctrine, understood truths that remain vital today. That life is interconnected, that the cycles of nature mirror the cycles of spirit, and that the divine can always be glimpsed in the living world, if one is willing to look, listen, and remember. The stories of sacred trees were not limited to individual cultures. They were part of a web of understanding that spanned continents and millennia. Across the forests of Europe, the plains of Africa, the river valleys of Asia, and the jungles of the Americas, humanity seemed to recognize the same truth. Certain trees were conduits of life, repositories of memory, and bridges to the unseen. In the mountains of Tibet, monks revered trees as dwellings for spirits and manifestations of divine principles. They would perform rituals at the base of twisted ancient pines, offering incense and prayers. These trees were believed to store the accumulated wisdom of generations, and to meditate beneath them was to connect with the continuum of life, a thread unbroken from past to present. In the deserts of Arabia, where water was scarce, date palms were more than survival tools. They were sacred. Each palm represented endurance and generosity. Travelers and nomads would rest beneath their fronds, seeing in the tree a symbol of divine providence. The tree, in such harsh environments, became a teacher of resilience, a reminder that life persists even in the most unforgiving circumstances. In Mesoamerica, the ceiba tree was central to cosmology. Its trunk was thought to connect the earthly plane to the underworld and the heavens, allowing shamans to traverse realms during spiritual journeys. Rituals involved offerings of maize, cocoa, and sacred incense, reinforcing the tree as a conduit between humans and spirits. Its immense height and enduring presence embodied the stability and vitality of life itself. Across Africa, the baobab's colossal trunk and sheltering branches served not only as practical centers of community but as sacred symbols. The tree's age and strength were seen as reminders that wisdom accumulates over centuries, and that endurance is intertwined with the cycles of life. Communities understood that their own survival depended on respecting the life force that animated both the trees and the land. In the forests of northern Europe, oaks and ash were more than timber. They were sacred. The Celts and Norse believed the spirits of ancestors and gods resided within them. Divination, healing, and festivals were conducted beneath these mighty trees, reinforcing the idea that the divine was not distant but woven into the natural world. The tree was a teacher, a protector, and a guide. Across Asia, the Bodhi tree symbolized enlightenment and awakening. Under its shade, Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, attaining insight into the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. The tree became a symbol of spiritual ascension, a reminder that enlightenment, like a tree, requires roots, growth, and connection to the earth. Its lessons spread far beyond India, influencing countless cultures and traditions. Even in regions where trees were scarce, humans created symbolic representations. Carvings, paintings, and woven images of sacred trees appear across the world, reflecting the same understanding. That life is interconnected, and that spiritual insight often flows from observing the cycles of growth, decay, and renewal embodied in the tree. The symbolism extended beyond the physical. The tree divine represented balance, harmony, and the interdependence of all beings. Its roots remind humanity of the unseen forces that support life. Its trunk of the discipline and structure needed to grow. Its branches of aspiration, creativity, and the infinite possibilities that reach toward the sky. To revere the tree was to recognize the interconnectedness of all existence. In many pagan traditions, the sacred tree also held the memory of cosmic events. Celestial alignments, solstices, and equinoxes were often observed through the branches and shadows of trees. Trees became calendars, mapping the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, linking human activity to the rhythms of the cosmos. The divine was thus encoded in nature itself, accessible to anyone willing to observe and listen. Across cultures, sacred groves became centers of knowledge and wisdom. They were places of teaching, healing, and spiritual practice. The grove was a living library, preserving the experiences of generations. Even when forests were felled or civilizations fell, these groves were remembered in stories, art, and rituals. Their essence endured, a testimony to the universality of the human desire to connect with the sacred through nature. The tree divine also taught humility. Its vast height and deep roots remind humans of their place in the cosmos. To stand before an ancient tree is to confront time itself. Centuries of growth, seasons endured, storms weathered, and life perpetuated. The tree embodies patience, resilience, and continuity, offering lessons that no written text can fully convey. Even today, modern humans, disconnected from wild landscapes, feel a profound awe when encountering ancient trees. Their size, age, and presence evoke reverence. The instinctive recognition of something sacred within the living tree suggests that the ancient wisdom has been preserved within our consciousness, waiting to be remembered. Across history, despite cultural shifts, invasions, and societal transformations, the reverence for sacred trees persisted. Humans built their temples, cities, and roads around these living monuments, often unknowingly preserving their symbolism. The tree divine survived not merely as a myth, but as an enduring teacher, reminding humanity of the intimate relationship between life, growth, and the sacred. Ultimately, the tree divine endures because it is a mirror of existence itself. It embodies the cycles of birth, growth, death, and renewal. It connects humans to the earth, the sky, and the unseen forces that animate life. It is a reminder that divinity is not abstract or distant, but woven into the fabric of the living world, present in every root, trunk, and leaf. To honor the tree is to honor life itself. It teaches that everything is interconnected, that every action has consequences, and that the patterns of nature are reflections of deeper truths. By observing, respecting, and learning from the sacred trees, humanity is offered a path to wisdom, insight, and a sense of belonging to the greater tapestry of existence. Even now, as forests vanish and modern life accelerates, the tree divine persists, in myths, in symbols, in memories, and in the quiet awe of those who still pause beneath an ancient canopy. Its lessons are eternal: that life is sacred, that growth requires patience, and that the divine flows through all things, waiting for those who will notice, listen, and remember.